great to be here. So, sustain. What do I think of? The first word that comes to mind is sustain a pillar, sustain an existing structure. But what if that existing structure isn't desirable? What if that existing structure leads to a minute of silence for farmers who committed suicide in France, not someplace far away, right next door? Sustainability is dead. Sustainability is dead if those who sustain us with their food cannot sustain their own lives. So long live regeneration. What do I mean? I mean making spaces healthy, creating spaces for people to thrive and to flourish. Long live regeneration. Why do we need it? Because business as usual creates damage, a lot of damage. You all have heard the news. Climate change is well underway. The oceans are warming. They're turning into junkyards for plastic and waste. Biodiversity is under massive threat. We are facing the 6th mass extinction of species, and it's the first one that we have caused, Homo sapiens. So biodiversity is like pulling or pushing against a Jenga Tower. For a while it'll stand, and at some point that nobody knows, it'll collapse. So business as usual creates a lot of damage, but that's not even the most wicked damage, the physical damage. The worst damage is that we take for granted how things are done. And one of the examples for me that epitomizes this fallacy is Jeff Bezos. He so accepts that we are about to ruin the planet that his dream, his billion-dollar dream, is to build a spaceship for some of us to go into space. I think that's great, go for it, go for your dream. And I would love the space travelers to come back to healthy, thriving communities rather than a degraded and overheated planet. So that is my dream, that we regenerate this planet. What does that mean? For me, that means recreating and improving conditions for living, not just for us, for all species, for all life. Regeneration is possible. It's been demonstrated. Photographer Sebastião Salgado reforested the land of his family in Brazil. Many others have done similar things. John Liu reforested land the size of Belgium in China. Watari Mangai got a Nobel Peace Prize for planting more than 20 million trees in Kenya. Some species are real masters of regeneration. Take a polyp, cut off their arm, and they'll grow it right back 12 times. But that is not the kind of regeneration I have in mind. It's not about going back to the past. That's impossible and often not desirable. It is about creating a better future. So some of you may say, okay, regeneration, very good, but I'm pretty happy with my life. I'm safe, I'm healthy, I have friends, I live in a beautiful city in Barcelona. Things are not so bad. Why regenerate? Well, some of you might even challenge me. I see some students here of mine. You yourself have taught us about all these companies that are doing the right thing and embarking on all these sustainability initiatives. Well, it turns out, is sustainability as usual enough? You may have asked yourself. Look at this, deforestation is on the rise. Why is that a problem? Because forests are one of our best hopes for capturing carbon from the atmosphere at a time when oceans are warming and absorbing less and less CO2. Additionally, we're encroaching on new land. Well, you could say, but we are growing, right? Our population is growing. We need more food. Well, the problem is we don't need to get more land before we haven't tried to make the best use of the land that we're already using. So the current situation is called inefficiency. And I will propose that regenerative agriculture can help us find a solution to that. Let's consider another fact. There is a lot of optimism around renewables energy, and indeed, the installed capacity of renewable energy is growing, and it's growing exponentially. Good news. There is bad news. The share of renewables in 2017 was only 3.6%. And the MIT Technology Review, a magazine that's quite optimistic about progress, recently titled, "At this rate, it's going to take us nearly 400 years to transform our energy system to a carbon-free one." 400 years. We're going to speed up, but we're way off. So progress, as usual, isn't fast enough. And this number is low, even though renewable energy have an unexpected ally. Picture this: the greenest organization on Earth is not Greenpeace, it is the US military. The US military is aggressively investing into renewable energy projects. Why? They want to make their operations more resilient, and they have also understood how explosive climate change, or rather the chaos that comes from it, will be for security. So just imagine this: millions of refugees on the move on a planet that is at its most crowded ever. So I say sustainability as usual is not enough to face the biggest threats that we have: climate change, biodiversity, water scarcity. And all of these things are playing out in Bahia. That's where I've been doing research with cocoa producer. It looks small on this map, but it's the size of France. And there I've seen firsthand the damage from climate change and from water scarcity, and I've also seen a lot of examples of regeneration. What are producers doing? Some of them are planting trees, native trees, that will make their farms more biodiverse, and these trees will grow so slowly that only their children and grandchildren will see them mature. They're replenishing soil. Let's take a look at a farm of Paulo Torres. 5 years ago and 4 weeks ago. What change do you see? Not much. A red car, that's my rental car. But the fact that this farm hasn't been abandoned means something miraculous has happened in the last 5 years. They have regenerated community. And that's the scarcest resource of them all in Bahia. Because Bahia has had a history of exploitation, extraction, slavery, colonization. So regeneration of community is a miracle in this context. How have they done this? Well, a number of things. When the drought hit, they did the usual things. You know, they looked for new water, they prevented fires. But what impressed me the most was how they regenerated community. How? By encouraging each and every worker to strive for their dreams. You want to buy a house in the neighboring town? Go for it. We'll support you in this. When the going got tough and the workers didn't have enough money for grocery shopping, Paulo, the owner, became the guarantor at the supermarket. They all paid back. That's how much trust they had. They're all having fun too. They're playing football 3 times a week. And that's not usual on farms in Bahia. So they're regenerating community there. They're also regenerating skills. And how? By producing something we all love, chocolate. Chocolate therapy. This is also a new development. 5 years ago, you didn't see such shelves. Now, they're inventing new brands, new chocolate bars. They're even thinking about outside of the chocolate box. Marcelo Abranches, a producer, he invented a brandy made from cocoa, cachaça, the national drink in Brazil. And he's going to present that at the Salon du Chocolat in Paris this summer. So they're regenerating skills, trust, nature, and the entire web of relationships between us and species in this space. You may say, sounds like small initiatives to me, but it's a groundswell of regeneration. And why are we seeing this in agriculture? Because the producers are the first one to get hit really hard when ecosystems start spinning out of balance. And so they know that their lives depend on regenerating water, regenerating nature, and communities. And it turns out this is not just happening in faraway places in Bahia. It's happening right here in Catalonia. In fact, yesterday, I was at a meeting in Castelldefels with more than 200 people who learned about agriculture, regenerative agriculture. I was there with Anna from Veritas. I had met her a month ago. She's the Chief Sustainability Officer there. And Anna, she's on a mission. Her mission is to expand regenerative agriculture in Spain, and she's building partnerships with producers, with scientists, with Patagonia. And why is regenerative agriculture such a cool thing? Well, it turns out it absorbs more carbon in the soil when you use this form of agriculture, and it increases biodiversity. So it increases the stability of the entire system. Think back to the Jenga Tower. And in fact, a year ago, Patagonia announced that they're supporting the regenerative organic agriculture certification, and their founder said, regenerative organic agriculture is the #1 thing humans can do to combat global warming. So how? If we want to embark on this regeneration, the big question is how? And I suggest by tapping into love. My inner skeptic grinches. I grew up in a small conservative town in the south of Germany with very practical parents. My mom at dinner would tell about how much blood had been splashing in the patient's office. She's a nurse in the morning. And my dad would say, you know, enough now, let's talk about fixing the house and the garden. So I don't usually talk about love. That's not the kind of dinner conversation that I've grown up with. So when I turn to these big questions, I try to look to the giants. And I have looked to Paul Tillich, a theologian, and he says, love is the reunion of the estranged. Who are we estranged from? Definitely nature, but also people, close and far. But that concept of reunion of the estranged gives me hope. Why? Because if we're just estranged, we can meet again. We can get reacquainted. And the fact that this is possible, I learned in the most unlikely place, in Barranca Bermeja, Colombia. Colombians call it Infernillo, little hell. It's very hot there, and it's been very violent. Why? Because it's strategically located at the Magdalena River, where you can transport people, timber, drugs, arms, you name it. So it's been a hot spot for the conflict. How do you regenerate anything in a place where people your age and fathers and mothers were routinely disappeared from their homes? Some of them found again, but with life and limbs lost. Well, it turned out it had something to do with restoring and regenerating respect and dignity. Picture this, the leader of this program, of a development and peace program there, Francisco Dhiru, he had to negotiate for the release of 9 hostages. He approached the kidnappers. How did he approach them? The first thing he said to them, he said, I believe you're doing what you're doing because you believe in your conscience it's the best thing you can do for Colombia. So respect for everyone, even the transgressors, even the kidnappers. Picture that. So what it allowed to regenerate lives and love, and let agriculture and industry and the arts flourish again. I told you I was raised in a very practical way, so housekeeping was a big part of it. And for housekeeping, I would suggest it's important to look underneath the rug and to see what could possibly be wrong with this concept of regeneration. And I say the risk that we have is that we only tap into our aspirations, only our hopes. No. Social movement scholars like Marshall Ganz are very clear. You need both. You need to hold the aspiration and you need to see the suffering, the pain, the grievances. It's that tension between love on the one hand and the suffering on the other hand, and that tension that liberates energy. So if there's anything I would want you to take away from this conversation, it's this. We need to change the question. Change typically is all a hype. Change manager, change agent. Everyone thinks that change is the coolest thing on earth. I would encourage to ask you to ask, what do you love? What do you want to conserve? What do you want to regenerate? And what's my story in this? I love the countryside. I don't know why, I just do. People, creatures, plants, except mosquitoes. I don't like them. I deeply care about and I want to conserve health, and I want to regenerate healthy food and agriculture systems that put life first. So I want to end on the question of, what do you love? What do you want to conserve and regenerate a future you love? Why not?